One hometown brand is giving fans a taste of the tournament. King of Pops is launching its Pop Cup campaign. It's part contest, part local business push, and part celebration for one of the city's biggest global sporting moments. Steve Kars, co-founder and franchising director of King of Pops, is joining us this morning. We are so glad to have you with us this morning, Steve. So you started as just one cart here in Atlanta way back in 2010. Now you've grown to more than 50 carts in more than 15 cities. So I want you to look back for a moment. Did you ever imagine that you would be this successful at this point?
Definitely not. I got laid off during the Great Recession, and I imagined instead of hopping back into insurance, I'd do this for a year or two to have a story tell. And now, 16 years in, it's kind of the only thing I've ever done. So I feel really lucky, and Atlanta's, I owe that all to Atlanta to kind of keep showing up wherever we go and trying these new flavors we keep making.
We love to see the success you've had. You think about a lot of food brands, and they grow, they scale, and they, if we're being honest, sometimes become less local. How did you grow King of Pops while also making sure that we keep that neighborhood cart feeling behind it?
I think a big part of it is I bootstrapped it with my brother, so we never took on any outside investment, and it's just been steady 10, 20% growth year after year. And like our good friend Warren Buffett likes to say, you add up compounding interest over time, eventually it adds up to a significant number. So at this point, we're making a lot of pops, but we've done it for a lot of years, and I think people appreciate and see that, and they're just a big part of our success, whether we went to their wedding or their kid's graduation party, or they found us in a park. They all, not all, but a lot of folks have a King of Pops story that kind of makes it more authentic and real to them.
Absolutely. Hey, so we've got the big event coming up here, and it's crazy to think less than 2 weeks. So you've got Pop Cup, and obviously it's going to be a huge deal for a lot of local businesses and brands. So how did this idea come about when you realized, hey, we can do something with what we already have, and now this big event coming up here in Atlanta?
Yeah. We're always looking for inspiration for flavors. We've made over 500 at this point, and sometimes you need a little bit of a new constraint. So we had not been inspired by Uzbekistan or Cabo Verde or really Spain, a lot of the countries that are coming to visit here. And so we thought it would be a lot of fun to create a flavor inspired by the cuisines of each of those countries, obviously with a little bit of a King of Pops twist. It's really fun, I think, for the locals that are here, because they'll get to try new flavors and kind of interact with what's going on in a different way. And I also think it's going to be really fun for the people from each of these nations that come to see something from their hometown on our board, and they'll either like it or they won't like it, but I'm excited to see what they say.
Yeah, and I'm obviously sure you've tried all of the flavors. What's been the one that really kind of pops to you the most?
Well, we had a true Pop Cup. We invited some influencers and folks a couple weeks ago, and so we did the whole bracket. I'm a Cabo Verde guy. It's dulce de coco, so it's pretty indulgent, creamy with caramel, coconut caramel, basically. The one that won that Pop Cup, though, was South Africa, which is kind of a passion fruit orange. I can't speak Afrikaans. I'll show you the wrapper a little bit later if I can dig it up, but it's delicious, and probably going to be among the most refreshing ones because it's going to be hot out there. We heard the weather. I was happy to hear that it's going to be nice and warmer on Saturday. That's our money maker. So I'm in a good mood when Saturdays have the good forecast.
You got to enjoy a good popsicle when it's warm outside. It just tastes even different. Steve, great to have you on this morning. Best of luck to you and your brand. We hope it continues to grow. Thanks for being here this morning.
Thank you. Here's a virtual pop for you if you want to try this. This is the Haiti pop.
I'll grab it. Thanks, Steve. We appreciate it.
Waymos that were stuck in these floodwaters, and then Waymo, kind of called all the vehicles back in and stopped operations. It was something I hadn't seen before in this city. Can you talk a little about, what that says to you, and is this unique to Atlanta's infrastructure specifically that things like this happen?
Yeah, Atlanta is one of the more difficult cities to kind of pilot and launch self-driving cars in. I think what we're seeing with the flash flooding and the reaction to having to defleet all the Waymos, these things are to be expected. Like a lot of these problems, they're hard to sort of engineer around and predict. You have to expect unknown unknowns. What matters is what is the response when something like that happens, and how do we make sure it doesn't happen again? So we got to look at those Waymos as kind of an experiment right now. We've had really, really strong adoption of the self-driving car service across all the cities in which they've launched so far. So these are kind of unique problems that we have to solve by, first of all, encountering them. So that's my take.
I mean, and if Atlanta is particularly difficult for these types of vehicles, whether it be due to infrastructure or the way certain floods or roads flood, I should say, or our traffic that everyone here is familiar with, why test them here? I mean, is it because of those challenges?
Yeah, I mean, eventually autonomy, I think over the next decade will be present across the entire of the United States and the whole world. But what Atlanta presents, which is unique, is you have a very dense urban center, but at the same time, very much suburban sprawl. So another interesting problem that the locals in Atlanta have encountered is Waymos have to spend a lot of time in the suburban areas around cul-de-sacs where they're hoping to sort of catch a ride. And we're now at a stage where the technology works, we have the vehicles, we've launched those cities, but the infrastructure to host them, or at least sort of hide them off the public highway, hasn't yet been developed. So we're in a very interesting era of the technology being new and nascent and people reacting to it.
Yeah, talk to us about that. And I imagine that's where kind of ASEAN and what you're doing now comes into play. But what are those behind the scene challenges? I mean, we've also seen those videos of, Waymos circling people's cul-de-sacs. And I do think people have that question. Where do they go? And what are those behind the scenes challenges and happenings?
Correct. I mean, we're now at an era where autonomy itself is working. You can have a robotic driver that can safely deliver ride after ride. Autonomy is now about infrastructure. And what people probably don't understand is it's a beautiful, fully autonomous experience on the road, but the second the vehicle needs any level of servicing, that vehicle has to drive to a warehouse where people plug it into charge, they vacuum the floors, they wipe the seats, they do exterior inspections, they do a data sync and a reboot. And these things happen actually 3 times a day. It poses a question around traffic. Prediction is if we currently increase the fleets at the rate that we are, traffic in the city center is going to increase. Atlanta definitely doesn't need any more traffic. Here in California, a Waymo's life, 44% of it is spent traveling empty. So it is, I think personally, it's okay to have a Waymo occupy the public highway when it's being in use. But the problem is a lot of the time, it's actually either driving empty or occupying the road empty. Coming back to the problem of a cul-de-sac is all of that servicing right now is happening in centralized warehouses. Eventually, we need to accept that autonomous vehicles will exist in our city, and we need to give them dedicated space where they can go and sit idle when they're waiting for a ride, and at the same time charge, get clean, and get inspected in preparation for the next ride. And this is what hasn't yet happened.
And is that kind of what you guys are doing with ASEAN, is filling that gap and offering that?
Correct, yeah. So what we're doing with ASEAN is we have designed a robotic pit stop station. It's effectively a micro depot that takes 1.5 parking spaces worth of space, and we can deploy across existing real estate in the center of the city. So think existing EV parking spaces, think parking lots, even in supermarkets. The idea here is to develop and deploy the shadow infrastructure that's going to enable these robotic vehicles to kind of live and service riders directly within the heart of the city center. And the reason why they kind of spend a lot of time and loiter around cul-de-sac is because people want the service on demand. So the vehicle has to exist within the center of the operating zone in order to offer that on-demand experience.
George, I'm curious. I mean, how much are these companies even making? When you look at how much gas prices even are right now, well, I guess the autonomous electric vehicles don't have to worry about that. But I mean, you're looking at things like traffic. They're sitting in traffic, having to go to these warehouses. Are some of those profits lost, and are they making enough? Is there more to scale here?
It's a really good question. And for autonomy to unlock the societal value that it promised, it needs to reach economic parity with ride hailing and eventually become cheaper. Right now, just to give you the example of Waymo that has to publicly report, across 11 markets, they're losing about $3 billion a year.
Ooh.
And the other example is that Waymo generates approximately, let's say, about $300 in a day, and around $200 of that is spent just on those human operations. There's a lot of people in the back end that are servicing those vehicles multiple times a day, and that's what people maybe are not aware of. The biggest bottleneck in autonomy right now is infrastructure. And in fact, developing specific infrastructure that is autonomous infrastructure for the autonomous vehicles to allow them to operate economically.
You know, George, I think a lot of people are hesitant about making lots of space in our cities for industry, for technology. I think there's a natural hesitation where we're giving up very valuable tracts of land. Is this something, these stations, that might solve that? I guess the simple question is, where do they go? Where would they go?
It's a really good question. Look, for me, as long as they're occupied and delivering a ride, it's okay to take up space on the public highway. That's fine. We should not be taking up space on the public highway with the vehicles driving empty, and especially when we can do something about it. I think there is a lot of competition for who takes up real estate in our city. If citizens are using, let's say, self-driving cars, ride-hailing, instead of having their own electric vehicle, plugging it into charge, then arguably some of those slots reserved for electric vehicle charging in the city center could be occupied by autonomous vehicles. And our product effectively deployed right on these existing bays, where instead of just charging those AVs, we can clean them, inspect them, reposition lost and found items. We can do all sorts of tasks that the vehicles need for them to continuously operate. So I think the argument of where do they live, it's they're going to live alongside other electric vehicles. They're just going to be shared, and they're just not going to have an owner or a driver.
It is so important to have that emergency fund, perhaps now more than ever. She joins us now. April, good morning. Always good to see you.
Good to see you as well, Dan.
All right, so I was reading, there was an article in the Journal yesterday that said credit card delinquencies just hit their highest level in 15 years. And they talked with an expert who said families are falling into what they called survival debt. Are you seeing that right now where people are using credit cards not for luxury purchases, but just trying to keep their heads above water?
We work primarily with people who are retired or closer to retirement. So in that demographic, I'm not seeing necessarily as much of a survival mechanism, but I am seeing a lot of compromises to lifestyle. For the first time in the last 20 years that I've been in this industry, I'm seeing more and more people who are retired who are having to increase the amount of money that they're pulling from their retirement accounts. And this is just an exacerbation of the cumulative inflation that we've all been dealing with, and some of those younger generations having really no choice in many circumstances but to rack up some debt just to make those ends meet.
So as somebody who works with folks closer to retirement age, let's say I'm 35, I feel like I have to tap my 401k because I have no other choice. I take $10,000 out. What could that do to my future self? I'm almost robbing my future self, right? When it comes 65, I'm ready to retire. What could that $10,000 look like had it sat in my account for another 30 years?
Yeah, the time value of money is a very real thing. And, this is not just with retirement savings and tapping that, but also on the other end, going back to the emergency reserve as well, that even if you can just start small and contribute even a very small amount, even if it's $10 a month to start with, $100 a month, whatever that nominal number might be for you, to start somewhere. I think in all of these examples, a lot of times what we see is that people really don't know where to start, so they just don't. And when you're not paying attention to expenses and the cost of living has been increasing for quite some time now, that really starts to add up for folks. And nobody really likes to spend time on a budget, and most people don't even really like that word. We really like at Reach Financial Group to kind of reframe that and look at it like a spending plan. If you don't have any idea what you're spending, you really can't work into some of these other solutions for emergency reserves, for making sure you've got strategies not only to continue to contribute to retirement, but also to make sure that you're not pulling from it when you have an emergency arise or that cost of living really creeps up on you. But to really have a strategy, automate what you can, start small, and don't think that anything is too small. That first step is a really important one.
So I guess once you have this spending plan, we're not calling it a budget, it's a spending plan. Once you have that in front of you, maybe it's easier to find $20, $30 that you can cut out and save towards your emergency fund. I mean, what does a healthy emergency fund look like for families and individuals in 2026?
Well, like you said, it's so easy when you really sit down and look at it to find $5 here, $10 there. Again, those little things accumulate to make a really big difference. And the average emergency reserve target anyway is really about 6 months. So if we're looking at the standard expenses around $5,800 a month, we're looking at $35,000 if we're targeting 6 months. Again, that might sound like an insurmountable number. That's okay. That's not where we have to start, but that's the end goal, so that when those big emergencies come up, we don't have to do things like rack up credit card debt or tap our retirement plan.
You said that the average monthly spend's about $5,800?
Yes.
Okay, and then I also just read that Americans carry on average about $6,500 in credit card debt. So if I'm stuck between choosing whether to pay off a high interest credit card or save a little cash for my emergency fund, what do you recommend there?
Typically, you're going to want to pay down the high interest debt first. We look at what's called positive arbitrage when we're analyzing good debt and bad debt. And that means that if you can invest those funds and they can do more for you than the amount of debt that you have to pay, the interest on the debt that you have, then that's a positive arbitrage. That's what we're targeting. But if you're going to continue to work yourself into a hole and never going to catch up with interest rates as high as they are right now on credit card debt, then for most people, it's going to make sense to go ahead and pay that down. But it's a very individual analysis, and it really depends on what your needs are and what those numbers look like for each situation.
All right, back to the emergency fund. Where should we be keeping this money? Obviously not under a mattress. We want it to be working for us in a way. Are there good accounts that folks should be looking for?
High yield savings accounts or money market are a really good target. And a lot of times you can go online. Some of the online banks that don't have the brick and mortar often are going to have some of those higher rates right now. I was actually just helping somebody shop this yesterday. You can still find, even though rates have been coming down for a while, you can still find 3.5%, 4%, and that can make a difference over time. If you're just accumulating this in a checking account, you're really going to make very nominal interest, and 3.5%, 4% over time can really make a difference. So especially as that reserve builds, make sure that it's not becoming what we like to call around here lazy money.
Final question for you, April. What's the biggest change somebody can make? We're halfway through the year. It's a good opportunity to kind of take stock of where you stand, no pun intended. What do you think folks should do over the next 6 or 7 months to really make a change in their financial lives?
Two really simple things. One is that we had some pretty significant changes to the tax code last year with a big, beautiful bill. So if you got a refund this year, and that's not something that's typical for you, take a look at what you're withholding. You might be able to go ahead and put more money in your pocket on a monthly basis by not overpaying your taxes. And the other one that I would say is really take a good look at what you're spending on a monthly basis. A lot of people really don't have any idea what they're spending. They just kind of know what's left over at the end of the month or what they hope is left over at the end of the month. So take a look at things that are, subscriptions and automatic payments. Shop your insurance while you're looking at your spending plan. There are a lot of ways that you can make some small adjustments to both of those categories that can make a big difference over time.
For a lot of teens, the next big test isn't a classroom. It's figuring out how to manage their own health care. A new survey finds nearly 3 out of 4 young people say adult health care is confusing, from booking appointments to understanding insurance and knowing what changes when they turn 18. So how do families prepare their teens before they're on their own? Well, we are talking with Susan Shansky, a licensed clinical social worker who specializes in that special transition. She is based out of Boston Children's Hospital. So we teach teens to drive, apply for jobs, manage their school deadlines. Why don't we teach them healthcare like the same kind of life skill?
That is an excellent question, one I'm asking every day. We absolutely should be, and I think that the awareness that people are having about that now comes from a lot of places. We have kids, lots of kids, about a third, who have some sort of chronic condition. So whether it's mild asthma or autism or some rare metabolic disorder, there are lots of pieces of this that we just hadn't yet built in the adult system. There are more kids growing up with chronic conditions that are aging into adult care, and we need to pay attention to this. So it is definitely something that we all need to think about.
And so when a teen moves out of pediatric care, what are we seeing as the first things they realize, like, I never knew that?
Sometimes they're surprised about leaving their pediatrician, and I think the onus is on providers to just talk about this more. But there are changes that happen along the way. They can learn lots of self-management skills as they're growing through adolescence. When they hit some hard stops, like at age 18, there are legal ramifications, as you mentioned. If they're now responsible for consenting to procedures, they have responsibility for who can know their health information. These are just things that are changes to be aware of and prepared for. They shouldn't be hard stops that keep anyone from navigating healthcare. You can still have your family involved. We all can. You just want to be knowledgeable about what's your responsibility and how you can negotiate those tasks.
And so let's break down what changes legally when a child turns 18, especially as it relates to medical privacy.
Okay, great question. When you're like 17 and 364 days, your parent or guardian is consenting to procedures. They have access to information. There are some exceptions for certain things that might be more highly protected for confidentiality purposes. But the bottom line is when you turn 18, you're the one making your medical decision. So you're going to consent to a procedure. You're going to say, here's who I want involved. You're going to assign someone to, either get information or make decisions with you. There are definitely young people who might need more help. And, in your state, you have to figure out how to support decision making. Guardianship might be necessary for some of those young people. So families are involved in kind of figuring that out together.
All right. So at what age should families really start having this conversation and getting ready for this big transition?
Honestly, it's a parenting skill, as you mentioned earlier, right? So always you want to be helping your child from a very young age to learn to speak up for themselves, advocate for themselves, understand their bodies, their health, know when something's hurting them. Kids with chronic conditions sometimes get more practice with this if they go to the doctor several times a year or even in the hospital. But everyone can really learn to manage their health and their wellness from really early ages. That's whatever's developmentally appropriate for a kid to be trying to do, whether it's telling you they're out of their medication or actually calling in the script. They can practice those things from really early on.
Really quick, we got about 30 seconds left. Insurance is so confusing. What are some of the basics young adults should understand?
Know what you have, know what you're eligible for. Look at those pieces of paper that come in the mail. There are definitely changes that happen at certain ages, including aging out at 26, but just educate yourself.
Fireflies are back lighting up Georgia nights, but researchers say the tiny insects are facing growing threats from things like development, pesticides, and even light pollution. Joining us now to talk more about it, we have Becky Griffin from the University of Georgia and the Great Southeast Pollinator Census. Becky, good morning. Great to be with you today.
Good morning. Thanks for having me. It is firefly season.
Oh, that's exciting. When is firefly season exactly?
When it gets warm and humid, when it gets to be where we don't like really being outside at night, that is the time that fireflies are coming out.
Well, it's funny because growing up, I equate those warm, humid summer nights with going out there to try to catch fireflies. Just a great pastime. I'm sure they serve as more than just entertainment for kids. I mean, what's the importance of fireflies to our ecosystem?
Well, the importance is the part we really don't see. So after a firefly female lays eggs and the resulting little larvae or little firefly worms, that's the really important part for the ecosystem. That life stage is where they serve a big role in helping keep down snails and slugs and some of our garden pests. And they stay in that form for quite a while. The form that we see, the beautiful flashing beetles, only lasts a couple weeks. But they are very important to our ecosystem. So it's not just, like you said, for enjoyment. They do have a big role.
And I know you study these pollinators and insects closely. What's the biggest threat facing them at this point?
Well, leaving your lights on at night. Nighttime lighting is a big threat because when they're flashing, they're looking for mates. And when your lights are on, it gets confusing for them. Also, that little larva form we talked about likes it moist and likes leaf litter. So if you're raking up all your leaves and burning them or putting them out for the trash, you're getting rid of lightning bugs. And of course, we need to watch what we put in our lawns and the chemicals that we use. But on a positive note, I'm really excited that because of some work we've been doing in Fannin County, Georgia, the governor of our state has declared July 2nd as Georgia State Firefly Day. We put a proclamation out about a month ago. So I'm going to encourage everybody to get out on July 2nd and really appreciate the insects in their yard.
I love it. July 2nd coming right up, Georgia State Firefly Day. Anything else we can do proactively to make our yards more inviting to these lightning bugs?
Planting native plants is always a good idea. Keeping your grass a little bit higher so those females have a place to go and have their flashes be seen. I think the more we get out and appreciate them, the more we want to do good things for them. So keeping those lights out at night is the easiest, most effective way to help our fireflies.
You know, Georgia has a lot of people moving in, a whole ton of development around here, around Athens, as you know. What do you think is the bigger picture here when it comes to protecting not just fireflies, but also just pollinators overall?
Education of people. You can have a very small yard or even a balcony in downtown Atlanta. And if you are planting some of our native plants, things that have ecological value, you can make a true difference in not only fireflies, but bumblebees and all sorts of wonderful pollinating insects that work for us. So just learning about that, making good choices and how you manage your property can make a huge difference and make it more enjoyable for you and your family.
Artificial intelligence is quickly becoming a part of everyday life. It's hard to go a day without talking about it. And now it's spilling over to how a lot of us manage our money. One poll found that 2/3 of Americans have used generative AI for financial advice. And when we talk about millennials and Gen Zers, that number jumps to 82% of them who have used Gen AI for financial advice. But experts warn there is a difference between getting information and getting guidance. Let's dive deeper into all that this morning with Julie Bates from Delta Community Credit Union. Julie, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me, Dan.
Important conversation here. I mean, let's start with the positives. Are there any good, responsible ways to use AI when it comes to personal finance?
Absolutely. You can use AI to really help get you excited and started in the education journey. You know, people use AI in all sorts of ways. Some are taking photographs of the ingredients in their pantry and refrigerator to help them come up with recipes to make food that they already have. Eliminates food waste, helps them really think about ways to stretch their dollar further. A lot of people are using AI to create budgets or evaluate expenses, to get education on complex topics, and even come up with questions to ask their certified financial planner professional.
You know, Julie, that poll I mentioned, 85% of respondents have used Gen AI for financial advice and then acted on the recommendations provided, almost as if it's a financial advisor. Does that concern you?
It does concern me. You're absolutely correct. The key is understanding the difference between information and advice. That's really crucial. One of the things that AI, puts us in a position to consider is there's no consequence. The information that they provide, it could be incomplete or inaccurate, and they're very convincing, even when the information is wrong. So it's really important that we use AI to begin the conversation. AI can be an assistant, a financial helper, if you will, but it should not be a financial decision maker.
I guess Claude, at the end of the day, doesn't have a fiduciary responsibility to you. Right?
Absolutely, it does not. A CFP professional is a fiduciary, and that means two things. Number one, a duty of loyalty, that they're going to act in your best interest and do the right thing. But it also has a duty of care, which means it has the knowledge to know what that right thing is. And being a fiduciary means having a accountability. We're accountable to a regulatory body, to an arbitration. An advisor can be censured or fined, and even in really egregious situations, sent to prison. There is no accountability for the information that is provided on AI. And if they're hallucinating and you don't know it, right, that could really impact you.
The hallucinations are real. And by the way, Claude, my apologies, just used you as an example. All the other chatbots, very much the same here. Money decisions, also so emotional for people. Does that kind of play into the danger here?
Emotions play into financial decisions. Some of our most critical decisions in life are wrapped around heavy moments: losing a loved one, deciding to retire, being laid off from our job. And we really need a professional to be involved, not just to present information, but to bring perspective and discipline and help us navigate those difficult times.
All right, if your kid comes up to you and says, look, Mom, I hear you. This is all great information, but I'm still doing it. I'm still using AI, my favorite chatbot, for some of this financial advice. What would you tell them? What would you say how to weed out what is trustworthy and what is not?
So AI does not discern credibility. It does not give different focus to the IRS website versus a TikTok video. So it's really important to think through how your individual situation is going to be impacted by that guidance. So we want to use AI as the starting point, as a research assistant, but not as the end-all be-all in deciding what to do with our money. It's too important.
If you're just tuning in, Julie's joining us from Delta Community Credit Union, talking about artificial intelligence and its use in personal finance. So many people now using it to try to chart their path. I'm curious to know how AI is maybe changing your industry right now.
I think AI in financial services, it's helping us enhance fraud monitoring. It's improving the customer experience and really giving us an opportunity to use technology as a support. But at the end of the day, if you have to make a really critical life decision, you want to sit across the table. You want to look eyeball to eyeball with a person that you trust, that you have a relationship with, and that can help guide you through some of the most critical moments in your life.
Do you ever see that changing?
I do not see that changing. I think human connection, as humans, we're wired to want connection with other humans. And I think that that's really critical.
So, Mr. Johnson, let's get into it. You go out to the Beltline for a stroll or for some exercise, take the kids out there. You go to MARTA. You're trying to get to your destination. You are not trying to be a victim of violence, specifically not random violence. Is it normal what we're seeing right now? It seems like there seems to be some type of increase in these unprovoked attacks.
Yeah, that's a really important question. And I think it's important for viewers to know that most acts of violence are not random. It's usually between people who have some type of association. So this is really, really unfamiliar, although it's not like we hadn't seen it before. I also think it's important when you see a couple of these things happen back to back that we make sure that we understand that is this really rising or is this just something that's been clustered together? It doesn't make it any less important, but I think it's important that we break it out and kind of understand what's going on. Is it a security issue? Is it something with mental health services or other services that perhaps can fill in those gaps beyond what policing can do? So for the most part, if you go out, this is not to discount what happened. Just know that you're more likely to be safe than not.
I do want to ask you about the random attacks that we are seeing. When something like this happens, when an investigation starts, what does that first 24 to 48 hours look like for investigators? What are they trying to piece together?
No, absolutely. And I think I want to also say, too, that when random acts of violence happen, it can really permeate fear throughout the community more so than some more common crimes. And so even though if they're less common, I think they're just as important because fear can impact whether you go outside when the lights come on, whether you go to the store, whether you use public transportation or go to the Beltline. And so it's really, really important. And so what investigators are trying to do to make sure there is no type of interaction between the two. Was there a bump? Was there something that they met earlier? Just trying to see if there's any connection. Also trying to understand and get the motivation of the offender, where there are some substance abuse issues, where there are some issues and priors that perhaps the system missed. Also, perhaps are there some mental health issues that may be there. And that's not to say that all random acts of violence are perpetuated by people having mental distress or undergoing substance abuse. But I think those are where you start pointing those things out. You also want to make sure that this is a one and done and that there's not some type of network and that there's not something more nefarious and planned going on, and making sure that it really is random. And of course, after that, that's just when we start making tweaks to how we do security, how we patrol. I think one of the individuals that offended actually had been diverted. So even trying to understand where was the gap at when it came to that as well. So those are just some of the things outside of investigations that they're trying to figure out as well, along with timeline, tracking the person's location. If a weapon was involved, where did they get the weapon from? Were there other people involved that may have provided a person with this weapon? So it's just so many things that they're trying to answer in such a short period of time to make sure that there's no longer a public threat.
I think about the recent scene that we saw on the Beltline where there was a gentleman on his bike and he is accused of stabbing a woman to death, unprovoked, lady just out on the Beltline. How difficult is it to prevent something like this when there is no known relationship between the attacker and the potential victim?
Yeah, that makes it really, really hard, right? It's almost like you think about domestic violence. It's not necessarily random, but it's outside the purview of oftentimes predictive policing patterns as well. So it makes it pretty difficult to, try to predict these things. However, it makes us wonder, all right, can we have more police presence to deter these things? Do we have more helplines to deter these types of acts of violence, particularly in our public spaces that not only are about safety, but think about the revenue to businesses and to residents over in those areas. And also the symbolism that this is supposed to be the safest place, one of the safest spots in Atlanta. And so it's really important that we protect that. Also making sure that, again, that if people who are known offenders, repeat offenders, if they're in certain areas, that we're keeping track and not a watch list or surveillance, but understanding their movements and if it presents a risk to anyone. And so, yes, it's really hard to police, but it does not mean that we are powerless. The ability of surveillance. Do we have surveillance that's not just recording, but is there an active observer? So when something happens, we can act more immediately. So even if we can't stop the attack per se, first responders, paramedics can respond and provide that life-saving activity even faster. So yes, it's a little bit more difficult, but it's how we post, it's how we surveil, it's different things that we can do, resources that we put out there, safe spaces, it's things that we can do. But again, these issues are oftentimes much bigger than policing and really involves all the other systems as well.
Can I ask you, when something like this does happen, what is going into an officer or investigator trying to determine if mental health or substance abuse or something else played a role in unprovoked attack?
I think that's really important. And, when we have to wrestle with not necessarily saying that mental health, substance abuse cause these issues, but I think it's natural and it's smart to kind of go back and see what's something permeating, what's something going on. So mental health can be part of the case, but especially somebody's in crisis, unstable, unhoused, or using substances, or repeatedly coming into contact with police, but it does not explain. But it asks us, makes these questions like, did the system have earlier opportunities to intervene? Were those interventions strong enough? Was there a real follow-up? And even if you hear about the case of someone being diverted, we cannot act like diversion is a cure-all. The real question is, are we connecting people and are we making sure that we're keeping them safe so we can keep our communities safe? So that's a really a big question that we have to do and focus on, but we also don't want to criminalize a broad swath of people because we know that mental health and substance abuse is not the overarching driver when it comes to random or traditional attacks.
Well, as Atlanta gets ready to welcome hundreds of thousands really of visitors for the World Cup from around the world this summer, one thing some people may underestimate is the heat here in North Georgia. Joining us now is Dr. Roxana Chicas from Emory University's School of Nursing. She specializes in occupational heat exposure, the perfect person to talk to for all this. Doctor, it's great to have you on the show. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Okay, so you and Georgia Tech actually studied this recently, looking at dehydration in Emory soccer players. What did you find?
Yes, we along with Georgia Tech are developing a biopatch where we are wanting to be able to predict before players have dehydration or heat exhaustion, heat stroke. And so what we found was that soccer players, even when they're training, which is like 2 hours, are dehydrated. They're showing signs of kidney injury and heat-related illness. And so that is what prompted us to want to develop this biopatch to protect soccer players and outdoor workers when they're working out in the heat.
This was a springtime study, by the way. What did you find that the heat did to the players in spring, and what does that mean it could do to the human body in like a June or July here in Georgia?
Right. So, we monitor these players in March and then again in April, where temperatures are pretty nice, right? So they're pretty cool in the high 60s. And what we found was that 10% of them, the first time we saw them in March, showed signs of kidney dysfunction. They were dehydrated. And then by April, when we monitored a second time, which temperatures were starting to rise a little bit, 24% of them had signs of renal dysfunction and even more dehydrated. So, which leads us to believe that in the summer, in the peak summer, this is probably going to be even a bigger problem. And we've seen this with farm workers and outdoor workers already.
Yeah. I mean, what kind of people are at risk? It goes beyond soccer players. Obviously, there's the folks who have jobs. They have to be outside. But then World Cup specifically, all these visitors are going to be hanging around outside for some of these games are at noon, and these fan fests are out there in the middle of a field.
Right. So who's at risk? Well, we know children are at risk, older adults are at risk. But if you're outside, and I'm thinking of all of these people who are going to come into these to watch these games, they may not realize how humid it is in Atlanta. And they may underestimate that. And so when it is very humid and hot, we tend to be more dehydrated. It's harder for our bodies to cool down. And so, if you're outside in the middle of concrete tailgating, or if you are inside a stadium watching a game, you may get heat-related illness if you're not hydrating enough and cooling down.
Okay. When it comes to hydration, what should we be doing? And I've always wondered, are sports drinks just as good as water?
Sports drinks are good. I think water is better. But it definitely, if you're outdoors sweating and you're engaged in physical activity, having a sports drink is good, preferably one that's low in sugar. I want to remind people, though, that alcohol is not a sports drink. And it's very important that when you are drinking alcohol, which many people will do to enjoy these, because it feels good to drink a cold beer, right? That you're also hydrating with water.
Okay. Have a light beer, then have the bottle of water. Alternate.
Yes.
Take your time.
Exactly.
Pace yourself. It's a long day out there.
Exactly.
These heat-related illnesses, can it lead to long-term impacts on your body, or is it mostly something that you suffer from here and now, rather?
Yeah. So what we are finding, what studies are telling us, that there are long-term consequences. And one of the big things that we are finding is renal dysfunction, where outdoor workers are having multiple episodes of the subclinical renal dysfunction injuries that are leading to chronic kidney disease. And this is associated with chronic dehydration, intense physical labor in high temperatures.
Okay. Anything else you want folks to know today about staying safe in the heat, or about your study?
Well, I want folks to know to listen to their body. Our body usually gives us signs of when we need to cool down and hydrate. So if you start feeling some muscle cramps, dizziness, headache, listen to your body. Take a break, cool down, have some fluids, and then go back to whatever it is that you're doing. Because the last thing we want is someone to come to the World Cup here in Atlanta and remember it for having gone to the ER because of heat-related illness. So, be safe out there and drink lots of water.
One hometown brand is giving fans a taste of the tournament. King of Pops is launching its Pop Cup campaign. It's part contest, part local business push, and part celebration for one of the city's biggest global sporting moments. Steve Kars, co-founder and franchising director of King of Pops, is joining us this morning. We are so glad to have you with us this morning, Steve. So you started as just one cart here in Atlanta way back in 2010. Now you've grown to more than 50 carts in more than 15 cities. So I want you to look back for a moment. Did you ever imagine that you would be this successful at this point?
Definitely not. I got laid off during the Great Recession, and I imagined instead of hopping back into insurance, I'd do this for a year or two to have a story tell. And now, 16 years in, it's kind of the only thing I've ever done. So I feel really lucky, and Atlanta's I owe that all to Atlanta to kind of keep showing up wherever we go and trying these new flavors we keep making.
We love to see the success you've had. You think about a lot of food brands, and they grow, they scale, and they, if we're being honest, sometimes become less local. How did you grow King of Pops while also making sure that we keep that neighborhood cart feeling behind it?
I think a big part of it is I bootstrapped it with my brother, so we never took on any outside investment, and it's just been steady 10, 20% growth year after year. And like our good friend Warren Buffett likes to say, you add up compounding interest over time, eventually it adds up to a significant number. So at this point, we're making a lot of pops, but we've done it for a lot of years, and I think people appreciate and see that, and they're just a big part of our success, whether we went to their wedding or their kid's graduation party, or they found us in a park. They all, not all, but a lot of folks have a King of Pops story that kind of makes it more authentic and real to them.
Absolutely. Hey, so we've got the big event coming up here, and it's crazy to think less than 2 weeks. So you've got Pop Cup, and obviously it's going to be a huge deal for a lot of local businesses and brands. So how did this idea come about when you realized, hey, we can do something with what we already have, and now this big event coming up here in Atlanta?
Yeah. We're always looking for inspiration for flavors. We've made over 500 at this point, and sometimes you need a little bit of a new constraint. So we had not been inspired by Uzbekistan or Cabo Verde or really Spain, a lot of the countries that are coming to visit here. And so we thought it would be a lot of fun to create a flavor inspired by the cuisines of each of those countries, obviously with a little bit of a King of Pops twist. It's really fun, I think, for the locals that are here, because they'll get to try new flavors and kind of interact with what's going on in a different way. And I also think it's going to be really fun for the people from each of these nations that come to see something from their hometown on our board, and they'll either like it or they won't like it, but I'm excited to see what they say.
Yeah, and I'm obviously sure you've tried all of the flavors. What's been the one that really kind of pops to you the most?
Well, we had a true pop cup. We invited some influencers and folks a couple weeks ago, and so we did the whole bracket. I'm a Cabo Verde guy. It's dulce de coco, so it's pretty indulgent, creamy with caramel, coconut caramel, basically. The one that won that pop cup, though, was South Africa, which is kind of a passion fruit orange. I can't speak Afrikaans. I'll show you the wrapper a little bit later if I can dig it up, but it's delicious, and probably going to be among the most refreshing ones because it's going to be hot out there. We heard the weather. I was happy to hear that it's going to be nice and warmer on Saturday. That's our money maker. So we're in a good mood when Saturdays have the good forecasts.
You got to enjoy a good popsicle when it's warm outside. It just tastes even different. Steve, great to have you on this morning. Best of luck to you and your brand. We hope it continues to grow. Thanks for being here this morning.
Thank you. Here's a virtual pop for you if you want to try this. This is the Haiti pop.
I'll grab it. Thanks, Steve. We appreciate it.